So I'm here to talk to you guys about how to use influencers to create a media machine. Now, if you're wondering what media machine means, and it's just another buzzword, it definitely is, but we just really like it. So hopefully you guys will like it as well. If you've watched anything that Cognism put out before, we talk about the media machine, and it's just our way of describing that, consistent, regular content that you can push out but when you start acting like a media company rather than a software company or a B2B company. So I'm Liam. I'm Global Head of Demand Generation at Cognism. That's a picture of me a lot younger and better looking. And Cognism, we sell B2B contact data. So if you're in need of B2B contact data in any way, shape or form to help in your marketing or sales efforts, please come speak to us. We'd love to tell you more. So my job is I'm responsible for all of demand globally. And when I talk about demand, it's all of the inbound demo requests that we bring in, which then obviously attribute to marketing and move through the pipeline. So I'm going to start with talking about, does influencer marketing really exist in B2B? So we're all familiar with like B2C brands working with influencers. They're everywhere. We know who they are. But do we really know that influencers are in B2B? And even if we know they're in B2B, how do we use them, and who is an influencer and who isn't an influencer and who can you interact with? So a short definition from what I believe. So an influencer is an influential person who has a reputation for being an expert in their field. They have curated an audience or followers on all platforms that trust and respect them. And they are also, importantly, content creators who promote their expertise in a way that engages and entertains their audience. So that could be in like a whole different host of ways. So obviously at the top are some well-known B2C influencers. Sometimes their expertise in their field, shaky, but they've got a big audience and they're all content creators. At the bottom, I've got some well-known B2B influencers, two in marketing. So you've got in the middle and to the right, Chris Walker from Refine Labs. If you don't know him, recommend following him on LinkedIn. He's great. And David Gerhardt, who has a community called Exit 5, which is on Facebook. Again, if you don't know him, follow him. He's also great. Both really revolutionary thought in marketing, and they create lots of different content to support it. And then for anyone who's worked in sales as well, we've got Josh Braun, who is also a great sales influencer. And he puts out a ton of content on LinkedIn every day that helps SDRs and SDR managers. So why influencers? Why would you use them anyway? B2B influencers are actually more than just their audience. As their content creators, they can help fuel the content you need in order to operate like a media company. And that's what we call the media machine. So if you've got an influencer who's an expert, they have authority. And that authority is what most content needs. The reality is that most B2B content is really rubbish and dry because it's written by a content manager and doesn't have any authority to it. Someone who knows what they're talking about instantly raises the game of your content and instantly gives, makes you act more like a media company as people are pulled in because they want to know what you want to say. And that goes on to the next point, a unique point of view. So a good influencer should have a unique point of view, that people know exactly what that influencer thinks, what they would say about something, and people seek out to go find out what it is. They're not just someone who's just sharing like your marketing content from your marketing team. They're not just putting stuff out to their big audiences. They're sharing it from their perspective and exactly what they believe. So it's authority and a point of view. And then they should also be delivering content in easy consumable formats. So I don't think a subject matter expert who contributes to your white paper or writes a blog in your company is an influencer. An influencer, one, has to have that audience online, but then they also deliver that content in different ways. Talking to camera, creating different guides, games, ideas. Josh Braun writes, the sales influencer I mentioned earlier, writes a little picture book called Selling by Snakes. badmouth bad selling tactics and why salespeople shouldn't use them. But that sort of content is like new types of content that engages your audience and keeps people, in their sort of realm of influence. They also interact with a highly engaged audience or community. You can't just be putting content out in their name and then no one can ever see them or speak to them. If they're interactive on social media, they should be like answering comments, replying to people, engaging. It's almost like they're a face to your brand. Like they are, a human version of what you do. And then they act as a catalyst for dark social. So for those of you who aren't aware of what dark social is like all the unattributed word of mouth that happens on like places like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, that is scalable and amplifies your brand. So every time someone posts, what's the best B2B contact data providers you use in a community online, and someone replies, Cognism, I use them. Or maybe they tag your influencer and say, I'd love to see what Liam has to say about this topic. That's dark social. And that amplifies and scales. And if you've got an influencer, people will be interacting them on these platforms, and they'll act as a catalyst to that. So how do influencers exist in a B2B business? So now we know what an influencer is and what they do. You may think, I'm already working with one, or I definitely know one. I kind of actually have one in my business, but I'm not really using them. So a B2B influencer could be a subject matter expert employed within your business, but they would need to be taken to that next level. Or they could be an external expert or consultant that you've run free or partnership-based activity with. Maybe there are big consultants or partners that you've worked with, you've had them on a webinar, people turn up to hear from them. Well, that's a B2B influencer, whether they're like phrasing it about themselves or not. And then external experts that hold a relationship with you or regularly contribute to your content. So sometimes, you just work with people who run their own businesses. They're like one-man band or something like that, providing consultancy, but you have some sort of relationship with them. That could be exactly the same. So now, assuming you don't have number one, but some of you know of number two or number three, here is what you can do to sort of activate that into like a consistent channel and use them as an influencer for your company. So meet Ryan. So Cognism, we have two personas, marketers and sales teams, specifically sales development, so SDRs, big user of our product. Ryan is a self-proclaimed professional SDR and spends his whole day and life cold calling. He's obsessed with it, which is just great. He therefore has become an expert in it, in cold calling and outreach. He co-authored a really popular book, Outbound Sales, No Fluff, and he's founder of Phone Ready Leads, which is a company that goes out and takes people's data and phone verifies their leads so they know who will pick up the phone to help SDRs. He's got 27K followers on LinkedIn. Which isn't a massive following, but it's a big one. But they're all die-hard fans. They love him. And for the last year, he's also worked as a brand ambassador and subject matter expert for Cognism. But all of these things that Ryan is, he still is. And importantly, he is not employed by Cognism, but we have contracted Ryan to create and promote valuable content in partnership with Cognism. So, contracted. What does that mean? How does that work? What does he do? So, we're working with him as a contractor to work as an influencer, but regularly, right? We're not just talking one post. We're not talking just here and there, just attend a webinar, stuff like that. If you do that, then we never build it and it can't scale, and we can't turn it into this regular thing that produces a ton of content. So we create agreement, but first run it for the first quarter. If it works, we can extend it to the next quarter. If it works again, you can do the final half of the year and then review and see where you go. But you can be really detailed, and I would say that if you go out and do this, should be really detailed in the exact activity that you get them to fulfill. So you can in the contract, we'll talk about literal numbers of video snippets, whether they're going to do a YouTube series for us, TikToks, webinars, hosting the podcast, which Ryan does, blogs, how many blogs they'll contribute to, events, whether they'll turn up to events, are they available for that, is that something they want to do, newsletters. So they write a newsletter, which Ryan does. He hosts our newsletter as well for sales. And then posting on key social channels. Like, so we actually took over Ryan's social channel as well. Like, will they allow you to promote to their base? Like, will they allow you to promote through their channels? If not, like, how many posts can you have regularly? Like, is it something you can completely take over, or can I have like, 2 or 3 posts a week? And what does that look like as well? And then sharing the partnership with you on social. So, Ryan wearing his like Cognism top cap and everything, pushing himself as a Cognism, brand ambassador on LinkedIn, so that people immediately associated that with him. So, like I said, these can be outlined right down to X number of deliverables a month. You can work out exactly how much that is worth to them and what they want to charge you for that. But what I would say is you don't always want to get too granular straight away, because it could be that a weekly webinar or a YouTube show provides you everything you need for the blog and the newsletter as well. So you can get smart about it, because you're going to be recording all of this. So you can figure out how you're going to work with them on that basis as well. And obviously on the side is just a picture of our TikTok channel as we started to try and grow into that as well and use influencers there. So how do you choose your influencer? So it's best to test the waters first, I'd say. So I'd say most influencers are actually going to contribute to webinars and blogs for free. Most of the time they're one-man bands of some sort. Like Ryan had this phone-ready leads, some nice alignment with us. He did some free webinars with us beforehand. I've got him there. He's also good friends with Josh Braun. We've worked with him just on some free activity as well. But paying them ensures that it's consistent and enough to like fuel that content engine. The problem we found with doing everything for free is we'd have one great webinar, create a great blog out of it, do all this stuff, and then it was just over. And then we were like, oh, what's our next best thing? Like, how do we get people to react to that? How do we build a community out of these people who absolutely loved that webinar and want to see more of it? So you can also, once you've, take them off the free, like I'm not only like paying for them contributes to that content engine, but you can also now as well include a non-compete clause, so they don't start doing all the great stuff with your competitors as well, and you can selfishly take them for yourself, which has really helped you take ownership over that community. So trying before you buy allows you to see if they're like a natural fit for you as well, and also whether your audience is engaged with it. If you run a webinar with them, you see they've got a massive audience, you kind of like what they've got to say. You run a webinar, but your feedback on the webinar from the people who attended, on the chat and stuff like that, is just sort of mixed reviews. It doesn't go that well. Then you don't want to start paying for them and lock yourself into any sort of contract. And you also wanted to see if people that naturally like them. I think there's this balance in influencers between knowledge and likability, and you really need to strike it, nicely in the middle. So, all things to consider, I'd say try before you buy, natural fit, already liked, audience size across all channels. It's good to look at that, see what you can use and where they interact with communities. Their network and value add. So like Ryan knowing Josh was great. We got to do a few extra webinars with him, even if we're not going to lock him down into an influencer partnership as well. And then obviously look at the content creation they've already done. What level do they go to? Do they talk to camera? What sort of like, do they do skits? Do they do other fun stuff? Do they create white papers themselves and things like that? Like, what do they do? I think that's really good to look at as well, because it also shows how much you're going to have to support them. So that kind of goes on to how to work with an influencer. So we found to get the most out of influencers, you need to set them up best to achieve their success and hit the content goals and promotion goals. I think the worst thing you could do is just hire an influencer and then just be like, you've got it in your contract, they're your deliverables, off you go, because you're not their first priority, they've only got other things going on. They might not fit the bill that you want them to. So it's going to take some internal push as well from you to get it to exactly how you want it to look. So we therefore, at the moment, maybe we've got a bigger team. If we've got a smaller team, it might not be possible. But we therefore pair our influencers with a demand generation manager and a content manager. So the content manager ensures you get the right content to fit our strategy in the right format. So they'll review everything the influencers put out. Maybe sometimes influencers are just doing so much, they put out a post and it's awesome, but then they move on to something else. What content manager is good and should be skilled at is they're like, oh, you got a load of engagement on that. Can we double down on that? And now you can create maybe a series of posts about it. a blog, include it in your next webinar. And that's sort of what they're going to be doing. But they also want it to like align it entirely to what you want to be talking about as a company. You know, they'll talk about lots of different things themselves, but when they're talking for you, you don't want them to be going off on tangents for things that might not actually like benefit you as a company or fit the overall narrative of what you're talking about. And then the demand generation manager should keep it moving and ensure that all of that content that we've created is actually being put out to market and like hitting the audience in as many different ways as possible. The last thing we don't want is that they create it, they post it on their channels or do something like that, but we don't do anything else with it. We don't, how else do we like escalate it, take it further? And also we want to make sure that, we'll happily let it go, that if you've got 2 posts of them a week and you forget to send them over their posts, they're not going to chase you for it. They don't care. So the demand generation manager is on beat with that. Like, have we got a post for Thursday? Get it out, push it up, chase it up with them. So we've got obviously here, like, just created different spreadsheets where we're like tracking metrics at the top, and like a working structure about each day has a different type of post that we're going to use, and then deliverables on that. And beneath here we've like got again like all of the main activity out month by month, like some of the big things that we're going to run, and then we share that with influencer, have meetings, work with them, and they know what they need to meet and deliver to. So what does that look like? So what you can do, and this is what we've started doing, is you have a live event. Like we have this cold calling live, and basically we invite SDRs to come up and pitch and cold call to the experts, and they run through their pitch and help improve them. And they love it, and they come up on stage, and it's really interactive with the influencers, and it helps sort of build a community, and people come back, turn up, refine their pitch, want to get involved, and they completely engage with the brand. So once we've got that, we can now turn that in. We've got like a whole load of learnings. Like an SDR would have learned something load on that call, one SDR and everyone else in it. But to the people who didn't attend that call, we still want to get that content out for them. It's completely valuable. And so the influencers would have just said something off the cuff that's like amazing. So we'll distribute it again, put it up send it out as a newsletter. We'll just write it completely out, show it, frame it from the influencer. They don't even have to write it themselves at that point. We've already got the content from the webinar, and we've literally got what they said. We don't need to interview them again for it. We can put it up as a blog as well, and we can have snippets from the call all the way through to like punctuate the points that we're trying to make. We then snippet out key parts of it, like where people may be doing their pitch, and then the influencers giving them feedback, and we can run that on paid social as video ads, sort of building awareness again for Cognism, and we put that as like out and like as thought leadership, entirely free, ungated, which builds demand for the product and company. Then we'll post it on the influencer social. They might, share about what they're doing, so we get more attendees to the webinar next time. People who engage with them love it. People who have been on the webinar comment back saying, "Oh, it was great to be on there." You start to build something. We put it on our own organic social, so that our organic social channel is purely value-driven, nothing like promotional or boring on there. Just chuck up like actual pure value, so people will want to follow Cognism as well. And then something that's super easy, which I don't think everyone would take advantage of normally, is if you have a webinar recording and you're not running through tons of slides and pointing stuff, it makes a perfect podcast as well. And the podcast is easy to consume on your way to work, on a train, whereas like maybe watching a video isn't. So we chuck all of these up on podcasts as well so people can watch them. And actually, the podcasts are like the most popular podcasts are all of our cold calling live ones. None of the interviews. Like I think some of the interview format gets like more tired, and this gives someone completely different to engage with. So great, loads of content out there. How do you measure it? Loads of activity. You need to prove to someone that all of this work is working. So I'd always divide reporting into 2 parts, and I do this for everything. So engagement is actually your primary measure of success, especially for influencers, because it's just about whether they're, what we want to know is that the content that they're putting out and what they're saying is resonating, and the people are interacting and enjoying it. That's what we need to measure an influencer on. Like, if no one's responding, no one's liking it, no one's, talking about them, then they're being a rubbish influencer, really. They're not influencing anyone. So that's what we want to look at. The last thing we want to look at is leads. because they're not going to be directly responsible. You're not going to be directly attribute a ton of leads to them. And if you do that, then your influencer program is going to be dead straight away. So engagement metrics are your primary success, and your engagement metrics show how well your influence content is resonating. So metrics to track on this would just be like, track your likes, comments, their followers, the video views all the way through, and reach from their organic posts, your organic posts, your paid channels, and the same goes for the comments and likes on all of that you're putting out on social, whether it's paid or organic on their channel or yours. You can start to get a real sense whether people are like adopting this person and like, you know, really respect them. Then you've got to look on your blogs, your page views, bounce rate, time on page, scroll depth as well. Are people staying on it and they're actually moving down and reading the content, or are they just, you know, coming through to the page and leaving? And then obviously for your for YouTube and stuff, you've got and for like podcasts and stuff, it's subscribers, total listens, average audience, attendee numbers, and then finally, and I think this is probably the most important one, is feedback from your ICP and like replies. People will tell you if they like your content, and if you're not hearing it, it's because they're not liking your content. If you get people replying to your newsletter, they're messaging the influencer on LinkedIn, or speaking to you, or messaging you, or anything like that, then you know that people are enjoying your content. That's when someone's really gone out the way to say it's good. So then, finally, after you've looked at that, that's your real success. Then you can look at conversions, because you'll start to see that if all your engagements are good, that your conversions will start coming through. So don't be completely guided by these, and ditch the mindset that, you know, if you don't have any conversions, it needs to go. If your engagement metrics are good, it doesn't matter about conversions, because you're probably getting them to attribute it to the influencer. Getting your inbound demo requests, but they're coming in organically, and the last thing it's going to say is Google, but they might have actually just been listening to your podcast with your influencer the whole time. So you can measure these though, but you can measure and get some idea of it through self-reported attribution, which I'll go into a bit more. First and last such UTMs, anonymous conversions on LinkedIn, which will help, which can be if someone clicks from a post that you put on paid, you can track them in the last 30 days. If they then come back and complete a form, you can have an anonymous conversion come up on LinkedIn that shows that they would have seen that come through that ad 30 days ago, but maybe 10 days ago they came back to your website to complete the form. And then also disco calls and demo calls. Sales team tell me all the time when people are like, oh, I love Ryan, I love Morgan, some of the other people we've working with, I think your content's great, I've been listening to it for ages, get all that feedback, and that just tells you that it's working. But then you'll look at the attribution and it will say inbound demo form or contact form submission. So how does that look for us or our results? So podcasts, we've had a 421% increase in plays since January. We've had a 295% increase in subscribers since January for the newsletter. Our live shows, we've doubled our attendance rate to 46% since we started. It's completely free to turn up, so people can just freely drop out. And then here's some of the feedback from the ICP that I said. So, you know, we've got people directly saying that they absolutely loved Ryan, they love him, and that's why they've even come to submit a demo for Cognism. Ryan first, Cognism second, but that's what got them to us. And again here, someone coming back and just saying how great and educational his content is, and they just love what he's doing. And then on the conversion side, you can look at self-reported attribution. So on our thank you page, we have a little form that pops up quickly and says, how did you hear about us? So your traditional attribution tools will often attribute the demand capture channels like Google or Bing. Therefore, like self-reported attribution is like your actual single best measure of the effectiveness of your influencer. So as you can see here, like Ryan is in the blue, it's quite small. So for one, influencers make up our fourth biggest self-reported attribution, but some people might put that down as social or webinar or podcast, and together that constitutes 24% of all of our conversions on our inbound demo form come from basically some form of social media influencer content activity. And as you can see, Ryan makes up the largest portion of it, but we've got like a whole host of people now that we're using to try and like push this out. And ultimately, we want to look at trends. You know, are we going in the right direction, even if we can't attribute all of that demand from the influencers? As you can see, since we kicked this off at the beginning of the year, our inbounds have just grown month on month on month, and they just keep going up. So it's fair to say that we can sort of tell that it's working through sort of like loose connections of everything, even if we don't have a direct UTM or form that's saying this is from Ryan and we're pointing him to a demo form or something. So number one question is always asked, what if they leave? You'll lose all the investment in that audience and no longer be able to have access to it. But I would say that the audience is only a fraction of the benefit. So the most valuable thing you have is the content, and make sure that in your agreement you can use the content afterwards. And if there are restrictions on that, how you can use it. Your brand will be exposed to a highly engaged audience for an extended period of time. So even if it's only for a year, then they're going to be, you're still going to have really pumped your brand into a really engaged audience of them. And then the other thing is just to have multiple influencers and don't just rely on one. So we also work with Morgan Ingram, who is a sales expert as well. And we also work with Gaetano Donardi, who is a marketing expert for our marketing persona. And you can create influencers internally too. So creating your own influencers. So going right back to the beginning of the presentation, influencers can be SMEs in-house. So however, to make your SME and influencers, you need to start building their personal brand, audience, and following. So the SME has to be focused on diverse content creation and building an audience to be influencing. So we have, in the same way that we structure that plan for the external influencers, we do that for our internal influencers. We have a plan of like posting, the things we're going to be talking about, the content we want to create. So you can't just have them contributing to blogs and white papers. You're not going to get it out there. They need to, we need to push them out. There are obviously individual pros and cons to having external or in-house influencers. So, in-house, they're closer to the brand, more affiliated. You're not going to see them post something that you're like, oh God, don't say that. But they obviously have an assumed bias by the followers. Whereas when you work with external contractors, you can, they look like they're coming inwards from an outside position, and people then feel like they can speak to them more honestly about what they truly believe about your company. And it's also not their day job normally for your internal influencers, unless you've got someone full-time hired in that role. But for us here, we've got Fran, who's our head of demand generation. We've got Alice, our CMO, and Dave, our sales director. So they've all got day jobs as well. So it's harder to find that time to do all the content creation, and you need more support as well. So what's next? And what are we thinking when we're actually looking into 2023? So we want now to maybe not just take one thing and split it out over loads of different channels. We want to create the content for each channel. So what we're starting to think about is a video that you've recorded on a webinar might not be the best format for LinkedIn, and actually sometimes a video to camera and making it for that network is better. So we're looking at categorizing our content as well, in terms of engagement from type 1, type 2, type 3. So to quickly explain this, and maybe I'll do a talk about this at some point or something that explains this a bit more, but type 1 is the informative talking head content that we see a lot of, and is all the information that people want to hear. But type 2 might be that same content presented in an interesting way. So here, that would be the cold calling lives. It's done differently. It's not just talking to camera or a blog. And then type 3 will be that content with an entertainment value. So we haven't actually really got much of this ourselves at the moment, but we're working on it. But if you know Todd Klauser from Refine Labs, he did and if sales and marketing were a married couple, and it pushes through that information that you want about sales and marketing alignment, but in an entertaining way. And that's how you can diversify and build your following with a range of different content. And then we want to move into further channels we've barely scraped the surface on. So TikTok, double down on channels that we know that work. LinkedIn, it still works, it works well, and we want to own it, and then grow our internal and external influencers, audiences, and point of views so that they become known for it. Thank you very much for listening and getting all the way to this page. And yeah, any questions, connect with me on LinkedIn, or I'm over there or here, so thank you.